Imagine the greatest performance ever given. Not on a stage in London, not on a Hollywood screen. A performance so flawless that for 2,000 years, billions of people across every continent, every language, every century have believed it was real. I want you to picture an actor who never once breaks character. Not under questioning, not under torture, not when it costs him his friends, his reputation, and finally his life. An actor who plays his role so perfectly that emperors fall, empires bend, and the entire human calendar gets split in two around the date of his performance. If that's what Jesus of Nazareth was, an actor, a role, a performance, then friend, there is only one honest conclusion. He deserves an Academy Award, the biggest one ever handed out. But here's the thing about that idea. The more carefully you look at it, the harder it becomes to believe, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. Hey everyone, my name is Alan and welcome back to the channel. Today's episode is built on one of the most important chapters in Christian apologetics, from Josh McDowell's classic book, The New Evidence That Demands a Verdict. McDowell didn't start out as a believer. He set out as a skeptic to disprove Christianity, and the evidence wrestled him to the ground. So everything I'm sharing today rests on his research and the dozens of scholars he gathered. And the question on the table is the single most important question any human being can ask. Not what did Jesus teach, not what good things did Jesus do. Those matter, but they come second. The first question, the question everything hangs on, is this: who did Jesus claim to be? Because if Jesus only claimed to be a great teacher, a kind rabbi, a moral example, then you and I can take him or leave him. But if he claimed to be God in the flesh, well, that changes everything. There's no middle ground left. So let's go find out what he actually said. Of all the great religious founders in human history, and there have been many, only one ever claimed to be God. Think about it. Moses never said it, Buddha never said it, Muhammad never said it, Confucius never said it. These were teachers who pointed away from themselves toward something higher. They essentially said, "Here is the path, now walk it." Jesus said something staggeringly different. Jesus said, "I am the path." The writer Philip Yancey put it beautifully. He said that all the strange theories that sprang up after Jesus' death only prove one thing to him: that God was willing to take the most dangerous risk imaginable. God was willing to lie down on the dissecting table and say, "Examine me, test me, then decide." That's the invitation. So let's accept it. We'll start where it counts the most, in a courtroom, on the night his life was on the line. Here's a question worth sitting with. Why was Jesus killed? Not for healing people, not for feeding the hungry, not for telling stories about lost sheep and prodigal sons. None of that gets you a death sentence. Go read the trial in Mark chapter 14 and watch what happens. For most of it, Jesus is silent. He answers nothing. Then the high priest stands up and asks him point blank, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" And Jesus breaks his silence. He says, "I am." And then he adds, "And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven." Watch the high priest's reaction. He tears his robes. Now, that's not just drama. Under Jewish law, a judge tore his clothing as a formal sign of horror when he heard what he believed to be blasphemy. And the scholar Henry Swete pointed out something chilling. This judge, who couldn't find solid evidence against Jesus, suddenly relaxes. Why? Because he doesn't need witnesses anymore. The defendant just convicted himself with his own mouth. Here's what makes this trial so extraordinary. The lawyer Irwin Linton noticed that this wasn't a normal criminal case at all. Nobody was asking, what crime did this man commit? They were asking, who does this man claim to be? The whole trial, the charges, Jesus' answers, the sign nailed above his head on the cross, every bit of it circled one question: his identity. Frank Morison was a skeptic who set out to write a book disproving the resurrection and ended up a believer instead. He said it plainly. Jesus of Nazareth was condemned to death, not on the testimony of his accusers, but on his own confession of who he was. And then there's Simon Greenleaf. This is a name worth remembering. Greenleaf was one of the most respected legal minds in American history, a Harvard law professor who literally wrote the textbook on what counts as valid evidence. When he examined the trial of Jesus, here's his conclusion: There is no way to defend Jesus' flawed conduct in any courtroom except on the grounds that he truly possessed a divine, superhuman nature. He said he couldn't imagine any competent lawyer trying to defend him on any other basis. Do you feel the weight of that? A Harvard evidence scholar looks at the case and says, the only legal defense for this man is that he actually was God. So under oath, on the night before his death, Jesus claimed to be the divine Son of God. That's claim number one. But it's nowhere near the only one. Let's go to John chapter 8. Jesus is in a heated exchange, and he says 7 words that nearly get him stoned on the spot. Before Abraham was, I am. Now, to our ears, that almost sounds like broken grammar. It's not, it's a thunderclap. Flip back to the Old Testament, to Exodus chapter 3. Moses meets God at the burning bush and asks, who shall I say sent me? And God answers, I am who I am. Tell them I am sent you. That name, I am, is the holy, unspeakable name of God himself. The name behind the 4 Hebrew letters, Yahweh. The name so sacred that devout Jews wouldn't even pronounce it out loud. And Jesus just took that name and put it on himself. The scholar Henry Alford said every unbiased reader has to admit that with these words, Jesus was claiming eternal, self-existent being, that he existed before he ever appeared in human flesh. And Raymond Brown, one of the most respected New Testament scholars of the last century, concluded that in the whole Gospel of John, there is no clearer declaration of Jesus' deity than this one. His listeners certainly understood it. That's why, the very next verse, they pick up stones. You don't try to execute a man for bad grammar. You try to execute him because you understood exactly what he just claimed, and to your ears it was blasphemy. But what if it wasn't blasphemy? What if it was the truth? One more, John chapter 10. Jesus says, I and the Father are one. And again, stones come up off the ground. This time Jesus actually asks them why. He says, I've shown you many good works from the Father. For which one are you stoning me? And listen to their answer, because it's the whole point. They say, we are not stoning you for any good work, but for blasphemy, because you, a mere man, are making yourself out to be God. There it is. They heard him perfectly. From their own mouths, you're a man making yourself God. The great Greek scholar A.T. Robertson dug into the original language here and found something fascinating. The word for one, hen, is neuter. It doesn't mean Jesus and the Father are one person. It means they share one and the same essence, one and the same divine nature, 2 distinct persons, one being. This, friends, is the seed of the doctrine of the Trinity, spoken right out of Jesus' own mouth. So let's add it all up. We have a man who claimed the divine name of God, who claimed to share God's very nature, who on trial for his life confirmed under oath that he was the Son of God. This is not a quiet teacher who got promoted to divine by his fans centuries later. This is a man who said it himself out loud again and again. Now here's a detail that once you see it, you can't unsee. Throughout the Bible, there's an absolute, unbreakable rule. Worship belongs to God alone. When people tried to bow down to angels, the angels stopped them. Don't. I'm a fellow servant. Worship God. When Cornelius fell at Peter's feet, Peter pulled him up and said, stand up, I'm only a man. Every faithful messenger of God did the same thing. The instant anyone tried to worship them, they refused it. Hard. Jesus never did. Watch the most famous example. After the resurrection, doubting Thomas, the skeptic, the one who said, I won't believe until I touch the wounds myself, finally stands face to face with the risen Jesus. And what comes out of him? Not a careful theological statement, a gasp of worship, my Lord and my God. And what does Jesus do? Does he correct him? Does he say, easy now, Thomas, I'm only a man? No. He receives it. He accepts the worship and then blesses everyone who will believe the same thing without even seeing. John Stott put it this way. Jesus rebuked Thomas for being slow to believe, but he did not rebuke Thomas for worshiping him. He never said don't. He said yes. Now stay with me, because this is where the whole thing comes to a head. A man who accepts the worship that belongs to God alone is making one of 2 statements about himself. Either he is God, or he is a man with a problem so serious there's barely a name for it. Which brings us back to the red carpet. So let's lay our options on the table. There are really only a few honest doors we can walk through. The writer C.S. Lewis made this famous, and it's still the cleanest way to think about it. Door number 1, Jesus was lying. He knew he wasn't God, but he claimed it anyway. He deceived millions on purpose. But here's the problem with that door. Liars lie for a reason. For money, for power, for comfort, to save their own skin. Jesus' claim got him beaten, mocked, and nailed to a cross. He could have walked away at any moment by simply taking it back. He never did. What kind of liar dies for a lie that buys him nothing but agony? And notice, even his enemies, the people most motivated to expose him, could never catch him in a single lie. The theologian Henry Thiessen said it bluntly: if Jesus was a deceiver, then he wasn't just not God. He was one of the most evil men who ever lived. Does that fit the man who said, "Love your enemies and forgive them, they don't know what they're doing"? It doesn't fit at all. Door number 2, Jesus was insane. He sincerely believed he was God, but he was wrong. He was deluded. A man who genuinely thinks he's God is, in our world, a man we gently walk to a hospital. But read his words, read the Sermon on the Mount. Stand in front of his calm, piercing wisdom, wisdom that, 2,000 years later, still outmatches every philosopher we can name. Lunatics don't talk like that. The mentally unwell don't produce the most balanced, profound ethical teaching in human history. The deluded madman door doesn't fit either. So if he wasn't lying and he wasn't insane, there's only one door left. Door number 3. He was telling the truth. He was and is exactly who he said he was: Lord God, the Son of God in human flesh. That's the trilemma: liar, lunatic, or Lord. And here's the door that has been quietly slammed shut for good. The comfortable, modern door that says Jesus was just a great moral teacher. You can't have that one. A great moral teacher does not claim to be God Almighty. The moment Jesus opened his mouth and said, "I am," he took nice teacher off the menu forever. He left us with only liar, lunatic, or Lord. Now let's go back to where we started, the Academy Award. Suppose, for the sake of argument, it was all a performance. Suppose Jesus was the greatest actor in history, playing God to a captive audience. Here's why that story falls apart. Actors play for applause. Jesus played to an audience that spat on him. Actors play for a paycheck. Jesus owned nothing and died with nothing. Actors break character when the cost gets too high. Jesus held his role through betrayal, through flogging, through nails, all the way to a tomb. And here's the part no performance can explain. Actors don't transform lives 20 centuries later. A play ends when the curtain falls. But this performance is still pulling addicts out of the gutter, still mending marriages, still giving the dying a peace that makes no earthly sense, still turning skeptics, like Josh McDowell himself, like Frank Morison, like Simon Greenleaf, like the woman watching this video right now, into worshipers. You don't get fruit like that from a fraud. A lie doesn't comfort a grieving mother at 3 a.m. A delusion doesn't outlast every empire that tried to stamp it out. There is no Oscar big enough because it was never a performance at all. It was the truth. God really did step onto the dissecting table, and he's still saying, "Examine me, test me, then decide." So here we are, friend, standing where the high priest stood, where Thomas stood, where Greenleaf and Morison and McDowell all stood. The evidence is in. The verdict is ours to give. And this is where I want to leave you, not with pressure, but with hope. Because if Jesus really is who he claimed to be, then the most important fact in the universe is also the best news you have ever heard. It means God is not far off and indifferent. It means God came near enough to touch, near enough to be betrayed, near enough to bleed, near enough to die in your place and rise again for your freedom. It means the cross wasn't a tragedy that ended a good man's life. It was God himself, on purpose, opening a door home for you. Thomas saw the wounds and said, "My Lord and my God." And Jesus turned and blessed everyone who would believe without seeing. That's you. That's me. The blessing is for us. The Gospel of John tells us exactly why all of this was written down. These things are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. Life in his name. That's the whole point. Not just an argument to win, a life to receive. So the verdict really is yours. But please hear me, you can't stay neutral. The one thing the evidence won't let you do is shrug. Liar, lunatic, or Lord, you have to choose a door. I know which one I've walked through. And I can tell you, on the other side of it, there is more grace, more peace, and more hope than I ever imagined. If this stirred something in you, a question, a longing, even an argument you want to push back on, good. That means you're examining him. That's exactly what he invited you to do. Drop a comment below and tell me which door you find yourself standing in front of today. I read them, and I'd love to talk it through with you. If you want to go deeper, I'd point you to Josh McDowell's The New Evidence That Demands a Verdict. It's where today's episode came from, and it goes far beyond what we could cover here. And if this channel is helping you think clearly about the biggest questions in life, subscribe and stick around. We're working through the whole case, one piece at a time. My name is Alan, thanks for watching, and until next time, keep examining, keep seeking, and don't be afraid of where the evidence leads, because the truth is not afraid of your questions.